All right. Well, first, I want to thank you all for being here. I believe this is our second to last installment of the online poetry series, The Refuge of Witnessing. Today we have Cynthia Barger and Margo Wizansky with us. I'm just going to say a little bit about each of them and then pass this on to John. So Cynthia Barger has poems who have appeared in many journals, including Gargoyle, Rogue Agent, Book of Matches, Lumina Literary Journal, Comstock Review, Driftwood Press, Loch Raven Review, and Stoneboat Literary Journal. Her prose poem, Beach at St. Mary's, is included in the new book of images and text, Our Provincetown, Intimate Portraits by Barbara E. Cohen. Sleeping in Dead Girls is her first poetry collection. Sleeping in the Dead Girls Room is her first poetry collection. Please forgive me, this is my first time reading. In addition to relishing the time she spends alone writing poems, she loves working with people to build, create, and bring about change. She was active in the student anti-Vietnam War and sanctuary city movements. She's organized around immigrant rights and struggles for racial, economic, and housing justice. She taught video and photography skills to teens in Somerville, Mass, while teaching herself how to raise money to keep this work afloat. This led to a career in philanthropy, raising funds for and consulting with arts, social justice, and workers' rights organizations, among others. For a dozen years, she served on the board of directors of Resist, a foundation that supports people's movements for justice, liberation by redistributing resources back to frontline communities at the forefront of change. She was managing editor of Pangyris Lit Mag for 4 years before transitioning to associate poetry editor in June of 2021. She loves collaborating with other editors, writers, and visual artists to produce and promote work that inspires and sometimes incites. And then we also have Margo Wizansky with us today. She is a poet and painter who does much of her time writing in a little cottage by the sea on the south coast of Massachusetts. Her first chapbook, Wild for Life, has just been published by Lily Poetry Review Press. Her poems have appeared in many journals such as Poetry East, Lumina, Inkwell, Quarterly West, Potomac Review, American Literary Review, and Spillway. She has edited 2 anthologies, Mercy of Tides, Poems for a Beach House, and Rough Places Plain, Poems of the Mountains. Don't Look Them in the Eye, Love, Life, and Jim Crow. She transcribed the oral history of her friend Emerson Stamps, who was born in 1923, and who is the grandson of slaves and the son of sharecroppers. I'm going to pass this on to John. Thank you all very much for being here.
Yeah, and Tess, thanks for filling in. Welcome everyone. This is, I guess, season 2. We have one more show next week, and then we go on a little summer break and think about next year. Cynthia, I'm starting with Margo, right? Yeah, okay, good. So we're just gonna dive right in. We've had, I think we had 5 people one time, we've had 4 people. So when we have multiple people, it's best to just dive in and use the time. So Margo, let's hear about refuge and what you're thinking about.
Okay, well, my refuge is poetry for sure. When I was recovering from surgery for a burst aorta, I was extremely vulnerable and I had to rely on others for everything. I even had to relearn to walk. I thought that writing would help me make sense of my situation, and I couldn't write in rehab. When I came home and finally began to write again, poetry was my refuge from fear and uncertainty. I began to write about 6 weeks after the event, and writing and healing became one. I wrote myself through the healing. I had a lot of trouble sleeping, and every day, as soon as it was light enough, I'd reach for pen and paper, and I'd write lines like these. Still gray, but morning enough. And for weeks, I didn't see beauty at sunrise. And morning comes in the spaces between the leaves. My head is foggy, gently tangled as those leaves twist and blow. I'm inside this body that doesn't work the way it did before. The poems in my book, my chapbook, Wild for Life, are chronological because that's the way most of them emanated from me. It took some time for me to recognize the trauma that my family was experiencing. They kept touching each other. That touch, a small solace, a begging, stay, please, don't stop breathing. Poetry made me understand that my mind was still intact. The last poem in the book, Tonight Only Poetry Will Serve, celebrates poetry's power to take my hand and bring me back to the table.
So do you want to read a poem or two? Maybe that last one you just talked about? You could do that now or do it later.
We were going to do that later.
Okay.
I think Cynthia has something she wanted to say about
Okay.
that.
Oh yeah, Cynthia, go ahead. I'm sorry. I forgot we got a ping pong things.
Yes, then we're going to ping pong, right?
Somebody just texted me that they lost the link. So let me just, if you don't mind, take 1 second and send the link again. Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry. Bear with me. Okay. So, okay. Hold everything. Okay. Okay, here it goes. Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. John, thank you so much for inviting us and letting us do this dual thing that we are excited about. Both of our books were published this year by Lilly Poetry Review Press, so we're pressmates, and there's a lot of resonance, as I hope you'll see, between our poems. My book deals with things that happened prior to my birth and in utero and then later. The official story, my book is called Sleeping in the Dead Girl's Room, is that when my mother was pregnant with me, my father's sister killed herself, presumably. They have to put the word presumably in there. When I was born, a few months later, we moved, my parents had already moved into the house where that happened, and this all takes place in Winthrop, Mass. And I was given the same name as the dead girl, Cynthia May Barger. So a lot of my book explores her being, which I don't know anything about because nobody ever talked about her, the shared name, and my own mental health troubles, which, may be the family disease. I mean, I don't know that either. So, in terms of witnessing, I feel like what I've done is it's a little maybe narcissistic, but I've witnessed my family life, my own life, and my time in a mental hospital as a sort of observer, and then especially the time I'd say in the mental hospital where I was pretty conscious, although highly drugged, and I really got to sense what it can be like in an institution like that, especially for women. I was raped there. I was, mistreated in many ways, and so I feel like there's a witnessing that has occurred there. I thought I would just quickly show 2 documentary poems that are in my book that are, I believe, related to witnessing. And they're short, and I'll share the screen and just show them to you. So this poem is, can you see this? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. This poem when I was doing the sort of the research for this book, I was trying to find out something about my aunt who was never spoken about, and I found an obituary. I found many obituaries in the Boston papers. This was in the Lowell paper, and I think it was a big obituary in the Boston paper with a picture, and I think that's because she was had just finished her freshman year at BU, so it was, you know, student dies in Winthrop. So this poem is a redaction from the obituary, and I'll just read it. Gas kills girl in Winthrop. 18-year-old in her home, gas water heater. The girl, Cynthia Barger, found by family. Medical examiner performed autopsy. Family expressed belief, accidental. Said the girl, swimming most of day, apparently planned a bath. Her body apparently overcome by gas. So originally I had called this poem apparently, but then decided to just go with what I did. And then this is the facing poem, and this is her death certificate, where this is called Presumably, and presumably suicidal, it says here on the death certificate. And autopsy, it says somewhere on here, there was no autopsy. So that contradicts the newspaper, and that is, you know, I'm witnessing, but what am I witnessing? What's the, you know, questioning what is actually the truth? And I'll just read this. The she who died by gas, a suicide, an accident, family and medical examiner at odds, autopsy or not. They do concur it occurred at home, 254 Main. The she who is I and did not die lived there, slept in the dead girl's room. So I think, you know, that's what I have to say about witnessing, I guess, and we'll probably talk more about that. Our plan is, and thank you, John, once again for allowing us to do this, we have paired 10 poems from each of our books for the ways in which they speak to each other. For the first 5, I will read one, and then Margo will respond with one of hers. And then we'll take a break. And then for the second 5, Margo will read one, and I will respond. And after we read all of the pairs, we'll each finish with each one reading the final poem in our books. So I am going to read a lot of portions, not all at once, of the first poem in my book, which is a long multi-part poem. So this is part 1, and I'm only going to read part 1 right now. The title of this poem is Creative Nonfiction. And I just want to say, you already saw some of that. The she who is the I who is not the she. I'm playing with pronouns, you know, who is the dead girl, who is me, and there's somewhat of a haunting going on. So creative nonfiction, 1. You, who is the I, are the patient. You and your brother stand in the back of the ambulance. No stretcher, no straps this gray February day. No sirens, no careening down Storrow Drive or up the Jamaica Way. Your brother pleads, why are you acting like this? It's not funny. He walks in the door of the mental hospital with you. Your father is there, pacing, does not look at you. You offer him a wallet-sized photo of the Swami, your guru. Hope it will calm him down. He says, sign the yellow form, make it voluntary. You sign. Despite the shot in the emergency room at the regular hospital, you are still high. They lock you in a ward. You have nothing. No book, no hairbrush, no glasses, no keys. This place is locked up tight. Alarms blink and blare when you try to open the door. Someone always watches, always sees. This is not sad for you. You are the one who laughs, the only one. An adventure, like an acid trip. You have no key. Key is not a metaphor.
Last rites were offered. My husband buries his head in my neck, says he wants me back, the old me, doing 5 things at once. He wants to obliterate the details of my collapse And yet he recites the catalog over and over. The lonely drive behind the ambulance at 4 a.m., the emergency room offer to call the priest for last rites. He refused. And home now, I do one thing at once, dress more slowly as the woman I was, put on one earring, then the other, my pearl necklace. I ask him to help me with the clasp. I take a silk scarf from the shelf, comb my hair in the mirror, examine my scar, and below, the heart monitor attached to my chest. Maybe he can't see me finishing one task before I start another, foaming the milk before I scramble the eggs. I might always be wary.
Creative nonfiction, number 8. Look, the first spring robin lights upon the rusted monkey sculpture. Look, crocuses cluster purple in the sandy ditch by my back door. If you, the she who is not the I, are traveling through, give me a sign. Be the fox that slinks across my lawn. Rustle the vinca on the knoll. Tie a ribbon on the rusted monkey's prehensile tail, or frolic with the hatchlings in the birdhouse among lint and twigs before you emerge, covered in nursery dust, to tell me our story.
I must have been wild for life. I held fast to the tiniest bit, held on down to my very beginning. Because I felt no agonies, why was I not joyful? Why so quiet and so slow? Joy seizes the rising moon. Why wasn't I holding the other end? There's a black line on my chest, lumpy and scarred. The week of my coma, what was it, absence or sleep? Memory does not assail me. It was only my heart beating. Was I in my body, deep inside, or had I left? I can't let it in all at once. Just a small portion of blue sky and a yellow flower whose name I don't know. Half the garden died while I was recovering, and the other half greets me stiff-armed. I sit upright and watch the kind of TV that simply runs my mind. Was I supposed to have died? Did I? Was I brought back? I could have slipped over so easily, the thin margin visible to me now.
Haldol. Haldol snakes in my bed, tongue depressor taped to the rusted metal headboard, to keep you from swallowing your tongue middle of the night, midst of a seizure. Like Louis, the Boston Terrier with seizures, my uncle left him with us in Providence when he took off for Phoenix. Like Louis, mouth frother, shatterer of flimsy tongue depressors, baffled, rigid, I blink, I twitch.
Morning has come, still gray, but morning enough. It was a good night. I didn't get hungry, didn't need roasted nuts, didn't toss and turn after a trip to the bathroom. I sip a big mug of foamy hot chocolate because coffee doesn't suit me these days. My first memory is moaning, no last. Completely cared for, I yielded everything. My husband pointed out the USS Constitution in the harbor and the dawn touching the Zakim Bridge. I didn't care about any of it. For weeks, I didn't see beauty at sunrise, didn't feel pain, didn't move my body for hours. I tried to find myself in my syrupy brain, tried to read, to write, trying to understand.
3 qualms. And these are in 3 parts, and there's an epigraph. 1, This is by Kazim Ali. Before I traveled through a body into a body, who was I? Water, exhausted, unable to breathe, aching for a heart to listen, to see the surface, to hover over the strange and tiny sea, uncloaked, bruised, for thrift, limbs, organza. Two, this is Susan Howe. She saw herself bereft of body. In the moment of falling, I blame cobblestones, pale baby in a padded helmet, squirming in the stroller, lips parched and cracked, a tiny bird under the left front wheel, a few bloody feathers in the gutter. Three, this is Michael Burkhart. I don't remember anything. You don't either. Girl in a locket, a trace, a stone. I polish the stone, carry it in my pocket, wear it around my neck. When I swap it for a glass globe, two dewy irises glisten on my windshield, tucked under the wipers, buds about to burst.
Temporary separation. I'm inside this body that doesn't work the way it did before, as if all my angles were filed down. Fear of falling makes me consider where I sit, where I step. Love is pulling me up. Every day the children call. A gift of sequin silk and flowers from my brother. You drive me everywhere, carry and lift. Nights are long, streetlights shining in through the curtains. In the drizzle, the neighborhood turned 19th century romantic. But the surgeon has separated us as though I'm covered in post office labels. Fragile, special handling. There's a big scar on my chest, and I'm afraid you might bang into me with your elbows and knees. I serve dinner by candlelight, hoping it's a temporary separation.
Tidal, that's Tidal. Cloud-covered, ill-omened, gunmetal August night. Driftwood debris falling towards water. Beach sail, baitfish, stranded silver peanut bunker, her hand squeezing wet sand, drip castle encrustation, pebbles, glass, the end, piling at the end. What is tidal? So, oh, go ahead, Margo.
A day we eat like gods, making its small explosions on the water, a luminescent day, brushed by dawn. Fog obscuring the opposite shore, the town and the boats, as though the indefinite world were dissolving. A benign day, blue, a foreign blue, distant, hopeful, cerulean water bluer than cerulean sky, and all the blue varieties of clouds tumble over themselves. A ravenous day, we eat like gods, bright acid of the garden's tomatoes, stone fruits, their sweetness decomposing in the dish, elderberries ripening to be pressed into cordial, vine leaves rolled around rice, a day pouring slow and predictable as if through capillaries.
Very nice, very nice. So, yeah, I wanted to ask Cynthia a question. Does the other Cynthia Barger ever show up in your poems?
Yes, she does. She very much does.
Yeah, I was going to say she has to be lurking in the background.
She's always, yeah.
It's funny. My dad grew up in Winthrop, so
No kidding.
yeah, he was one of 9.
Wow.
So yeah, there's all sorts of Winthrop stories in the. And my grandmother wasn't supposed to smoke. My dad was a doctor, so when he came home, my grandmother would open up the refrigerator and put the cigarette in the freezer. Yeah, she was. That's how I learned all my good behavior. My My grandmother probably should have been dealing cards underneath at Vegas, or the cigarette hanging out of her mouth. Yeah, she was
Did
always
you,
need a role model. Sometimes it's not. No, she was great. She was fantastic.
John, did you go to Winthrop at all? Have you?
We went, eh, we did somewhat, but after a point in time, as everyone kind of aged out and passed on, we'd go to the cemetery. We used to go to the cemetery on Memorial Day, and
Mhm.
back then Winthrop's nothing like it is now. Obviously, everything changes, but we had grown up in Newton, so we weren't that far away.
Yeah.
So, I think it was really interesting. What I like about both you and Margo, there's a tremendous personal journey that's emerging in your poetry. Margo, obviously for you, the chronology of recovery. So I'm just, is that? Let me ask the question a different way. I haven't asked the question. Let me ask the question. Do those memories, kind of prompt some of your writing? Because it just seems like you two have this treasure chest of, well, I'm sure like everybody does, personal memories, but it seems like they go from, your heart to your pen and then go on paper. So I'm just wondering, is that true of most of your poetry, or is this just this slice that we're looking at?
Well, I think for me, memory is a big part of my poetry. But this was kind of a memoir in poetry. It was the healing process, pretty much from beginning to end. I mean, I was in a coma for a week. It was medically induced, but I read recently that very few people really emerge intact from that. So my family was waiting around, not knowing what they would have of me at the end. So writing the poems is very powerful, and the experience is always there in every poem I write, from when it began through my current writing. It's just always there.
And what year was the first aorta?
Oh, it was almost 3 years ago.
Yeah. Normally there's not a good, I don't think a lot of people make it to the hospital.
No.
So you must, the poetry gods look down upon you, because because once you said that, I just said, you don't read about many people surviving that. So yeah, you had things you needed to write.
Yeah. A lot of it was luck, and
Yeah.
a lot of it the right people being there at the right time. It all kind of fell into place. That it happened at night, in the middle of the night, and my husband was there and he knew what to do, and so on.
I know those stories are great. I think there was something recently in the Globe about someone that happened to be close by, and who was it? Someone told me. No, someone told me that I know. They collapsed at a health club, and the two people next to him in line were a doctor who was a cardiologist and a cardiologist nurse.
Wow.
So if you're gonna pass out on the floor, it's great to have your doctor. Not, it wasn't their doctor, but it's great to have someone like right next to you that can. Yeah, but that saved his life. If that hadn't happened, if he had been outside in his car, he would have been dead. Yeah. So I think you were blessed, and I'm glad you're here to share that with us.
Thanks.
So Cynthia, maybe we're kind of at the half hour, so I've got some other things I want to say, but for those of you, I mean, Perry and Donna are very loyal attendees. We like to have the audience, if you want to make a comment, ask a question. I think Perry knows I use a lot of humor. Don't let the poets off easy. This is the time to make them sweat. Vivian, come on, let's let's look at Vivian like, well, I don't do that. No, if you do, I think part of it is I think it's great to expand upon a comment or a question for the poets. If you have it. If you don't, we'll just move on. Anybody? Vivian, did you raise your hand?
I did. I wanted to know from each of you went through a different kind of trauma. And I was wondering, how long does it take to write about something that's so traumatic after you've experienced it?
Margo and I are very different in this regard. It took me like 40 something years to write about this. And I was, and I came later to poetry. So I've been writing poetry like 25 years. And over time, I started to write a few poems that had this aunt in there. And I was saying to people, oh, I guess this is my poetic obsession. And that's how I kind of looked at it. And like Margo, my book is somewhat, memoir and poems, I guess. And I it just started to bubble up more. And my mother died in April of 2016, and I took a workshop in July of 2016 with the poet Brian Turner, and it was actually a memoir workshop. And I kind of envisioned this as a poetry and prose. It's all poetry now, but and that's when I started calling in, calling in the spirit and calling in the memories. So it took me a long time. Thanks for that question.
Good question. I mean, for me, it was about 6 weeks after the accident, which felt like a really long time for me because I felt like I couldn't write anymore. And if I couldn't write anymore, what was I going to do with my life? So when I began to write, it pulled me through the recovery process. And I just kept on writing every day.
Anybody else?
Oh, sorry. I just
How do
wanted,
you how do you think the pandemic has changed or affected your writing? Because I can answer that with my writing. Everybody says, "Well, now you had a lot of time and you must be able to write." I didn't find that at all. I found it really difficult.
I actually got this book was finished pretty much when the pandemic started.
When it started.
No, I was still working on it. That's not true. I was working on it for 5 years and I started in 2016. Yeah, so I found the pandemic, delightful in terms of writing. I liked being locked down. I liked, just like there's nothing else to do. And I actually met Margo because she was in another writing group that was meeting in person, and they went online, and another member invited me, and we were online 3 days a week, writing and workshopping and reading. So I feel like it was like, I never got an MFA. I felt like the pandemic was my MFA in poetry.
And for me, the accident and the recovery was preparing me for the pandemic because I was already leading a very quiet life and doing very little and seeing very few people while I was recovering. And then it didn't change much. Just the location changed because, as I told John, our children sent us down to the seashore and said, you have to stay here until the pandemic stops.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
And similarly, we got sent down, we sent ourselves down to the seashore, and we didn't expect that we'd stay here full time. And then the pandemic came and we never left.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Cynthia's in Provincetown, Mass, and Margo is in Mattapoisett.
Right.
One of those great, indigenous names of Massachusetts. So Cynthia, I had a question for you. I just want to replay something you said, like when, the dead sister, did the dead sister kind of disappear
Mhm,
from the family dialogue? So when you grew up,
mhm.
there was no reference to your Cynthia too, or your,
Right. Nothing. Nothing. My father lived to be 87 years old, and I really don't believe that he ever mentioned her name, and we never spoke about her. And my cousin's children didn't even know, she existed. My father's brother's kids. And when they found out I was working on this project, they were like, "Who's that? Dad, we didn't know you had a sister." And yeah, I mean, there are photos of her, and in my book, I have a poem about my grandmother wore a locket with her picture in it, and I was intrigued, and I would say, who's that?" And she'd say, "Oh, that's my Cindy. She's in a better place now." And I think my grandmother might have liked to talk about it, but I didn't, I didn't know that. She would mention her name sometimes, but my grandfather never did, and my father never did.
yeah, the shock must have run pretty deep if everyone decided to
Yeah. Well,
go silent.
there was shame, that goes along often with suicide, which is a shame. But I believe that there was that as well.
Hmm. Anybody else? Any comments or questions? So Cynthia, I hope you're going to read. I'd be very intrigued with the other Cindy's voice, maybe in one of your poems, if you have one selected. If not, don't worry about it. Um, so you read the two documentary poems. Let's just talk about. We talked. I think we probably focus more on refuge. Um, what is witnessing? Maybe I'll start with Margo since I've been, hammering Cynthia about her family tree. Um, Margo, what does witnessing mean to you?
Well, I think it's the poet's responsibility to be witness and to find a way to give voice to the unspeakable that's going on all around us, whether it's political or it might even be on a smaller scale in our families. I think that it's the context in which we write. Um, and I have an example from my family. My mother had tremendous difficulty, wasn't able to bear witness to the abuse and harassment that she had experienced at the hands of her boss. And I think that being able to give voice to it might have relieved her shame and might have helped other women. I've written about that recently in a poem that was just published, but I really do believe that it's our job to be witness.
Really nice. Cynthia, how about you? What's your take on witnessing?
Well, what Margot said, but also for me, it's telling the things that, it's the unspeakable. There were many, many unspeakables in my family, and it's telling those secrets and not being afraid to do it and not being ashamed. And there's some kind of a release that comes from that. And also because I don't really, what is objectivity? I mean, everything is subjective. So any witnessing is through a certain lens, and there's only so much that I can pull out that's fact or truth. So I also feel like as poets we get to kind of make it up too, and then other people can witness our, what we've decided was the story that we're going to tell. I mean, I never lie in my poems, but I certainly have, imaginative leaps that they're not really they're not the pure witnessing. They're the what I take from what I've witnessed and made into something else, if that makes sense.
And hey, what's your, maybe I'm asking a dumb question. What was your family's reaction at times to, did they read a lot of your poems that were very personal?
No,
No?
no. My brother reads my poems, and he features, well, in a little bit in this book, and he's surprised. It's the younger generation. My niece, my brother's daughter, it's like, I didn't know any of this in our family. It's sort of like, am I telling uh, things that anybody ever even suspected? Not really. I mean, my brother knew some because I talked about this, and this is off not. She visited me when I was in the mental hospital, and that's what came back to me when I started thinking about this. So that's not the kind of thing my my parents would talk about, or they wouldn't talk about her alive. They certainly, her visitation was not something that we would explore together. And even my brother, I think, is like a little, but it just feels like it's all sits with me.
Hmm. It's a big burden to carry. Yeah, just to segue for a minute. So you're talking about your family and poetry. Perry, this may have been before you started, listening in. We had one poet that most of her poems were about her family, and 5 of those family members were on our poetry hour. So basically, I felt like I needed a flak vest or something. I was waiting for the sparks to fly. And one of them said, "Well, I don't know. You need to write more poems about me. Why isn't there?" Yeah, we're like, okay, wait a second. We got a Worldwide Wrestling Federation poetry bake-off, something like that. So Margo, are there additional poems you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, we have 5 more that we were.
Yeah, good. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start. All of it changes at evening. String of cars on the bridge, halos from streetlights. Night things have their time. I don't want the dark in rehab. When the big shade draws down, semi-opaque, worked with a switch, I start counting the hours. At 5:30, the sunlight begins, touching the cables, the tugboats, unless fog closes the whole landscape, making me shut in and very small. If it were all right just to love and die, I wouldn't be in this place 7 stories up. Thank God for the harbor and the barges my husband loves to watch.
Nice.
From her came not a sound. And there's an epigraph from Rilke. Where is she vanishing? A girl, almost. Midnight, you alone in the day room, reek and linger dinner odor, oversteamed vegetables, burnt hamburger meat. You watch the night staff huddle. 4 of them play hearts, fill the nurse's station, its glass walls aglow. Night nurse wins, throws the cards in the air, hoots. Your Haldol haze, pierced by the haulers, you writhe and rise. Swollen tongue flutters your mouth like a frantic baby bird. Breeze echoes your name, her name. You did not lay a marigold trail for vapor, make a welcome altar or a fire to guide her. And like you, she eschews pageantry, vanishes.
3 months out, hoping for something more. The night too hot and wet. Morning comes in the spaces between the leaves. My head is foggy, gently tangled as those leaves twist and blow. Today I could cry. Will I get any better, any stronger? I'm still awake from 2 to 4 a.m., and sometimes longer. My life is small and it bores me, smaller than a Kleenex box. It sits on the end of the sofa. The spirit leaked out. I want to be tight with it, as tight as a tomato in its skin, so tight I could split. I want everything, to have poems gush out of me, to cook dishes I gorge on, to walk on streets I've never walked, to dig for giant quahogs that resist my rake, stay fast in their holes. An almost sour listlessness pins me to the chair. And when I raise myself to stand, my legs are heavy. I trudge the neighborhood, knees shouting, stop, stop.
Creative nonfiction 4. Upon release, the I who is me is a body whose long hair smells like the mental hospital dumbwaiter. I get a buzz cut from a friend. My cousin asks, "Did they buzz your hair off in that place?" Disbelieves me when I claim it's a fashion choice. Lithium makes the body grow fat. I am round and shorn and will stay like that for years. Eat cookies all day long, M&Ms every color. Pair alcohol and lithium and puke out the car window. Soon will renounce Jack Daniels, dry vermouth. Later, lithium. Mine is a body in revolt. It asks forgiveness, remembers vapor, misses vapor.
Small talk. These mornings I don't speak, and certainly not of love. I could be nicer to you when you want to touch me with your words, any words, hold me with a thread of sound. It's my mother I blame. Talk frightened her. She'd scrutinize her nails. I broke a nail, she'd say. I have a hangnail. Her hands performing small, sad movements, never still. You only ever wanted the hum in my throat to answer the hum in yours. I've been ruined for the mornings.
Creative nonfiction 5. Cookies. On the recording, your mother says she didn't want you eating cookies all day long. All day long? Did the I eat them all day long? You know you did. Is it too bad your brother didn't ask your father? Your father would not have answered. Your father locked the dead she away, would have said, "You don't need to know. Stop asking questions, too many questions." You know your father, or do you? The details and the pictures come later.
Terms of endearment. Muffin I was when we first got together, soft and top heavy, flesh rolling over my waistband. Muffin going dry and stale in the air, crumbling to the touch. You're adorable, a huge billboard you've mounted above the highway. Teeny weeny me, my hand over my eyes so I don't have to see it. Adorable like a Cupid doll with big eyes and hollow inside. I love you, you say, when there's nothing adorable or soft about me. I love you, you say, when I won't let you take my poem as though it were yours, the one that moves you. I love you, you say, when I'm bitching about your old man noises. I love you, you say, instead of you're wounding me. I'm a killer bee. Sorry, I can't stop stinging.
Creative nonfiction 7. Listen, mosquitoes, rain and high tide, they hatch in the marsh among the cattails. Larvae attach to the roots, submerge until mature. Let's name them scourge, known to enter homes solo or coupled at night. These vampiric bugles devil our ears, sneak between the balusters, feast till blood drunk. And then let's not name the she, shh, shh, who comes when they call the I, nor the I who comes when they call the she. Shh, shh.
Where was August? It wrecked my summer. My heart opened and took the hot and sunny days where August should have been, sweating and laughing. Oh, the many days I have missed, wondering whether I'll sleep tonight. Friends think it should be over. I should be recovered. Two beds of impatience completely disappeared from my untended garden, a collection of spent stems and weeds, and no one looking after it. I cut the two giant zinnias that remain.
Locked ward. Winston and Sterling walk me 2 flights up to the top floor. The stench, stale pee. I ask, where's the phone? No calls here, Sterling smiles. This here's not a hotel, missy. You play hearts, Winston asks. I fumble my answer and Sterling warns, stay cool, missy, stay cool.
And now
Great.
we're going to read the last poem from our book.
Okay. Okay, good.
Tonight, only poetry will serve after Adrienne Rich. Only poetry will fly among the planets, the stars, the new moon, and my unconscious. Awakened from coma, there's a Chernobyl in my throat, I said, a metaphor on my tongue. Only poetry will stand me up on a scallop shell, naked in my wavy hair, while the nurses shower me, scrub my back, and I hold on, grateful to be upright, oblivious to everyone elsewhere, standing or not. And only poetry will pull me word by word by word to the table where I write verb, noun, participle, sometimes a reckless adjective. I am returned.
Very nice.
Really nice. This is my last poem in my book. It's in 3 parts. A fiction. 1. You don't die. Let's say my name is Jody. When your parents learn you are pregnant, they won't allow you to live at 254 Main. Your brother, who will become my father, invites you to move in with him and his wife. You give birth to your son. Let's call him Simon. 1 month later, my mother has me. Simon and I, cousin twins. 2. Let's say my name is Joanne. You anger your parents, try to be good. Latin Club President, Vestal Virgin. How could you? Who are you? You have a boyfriend. Let's call him Duncan. His parents fold you in. He drives you to your college classes, picks you up after working at the marina. Duncan, too, tries to be good. You move from 254 Main, live with Duncan and his parents. You are Cynthia. I am Joanne, your baby niece. So alive are you as you push my stroller up and down the crest. And 3. Let's say my name is Josephine. You marry your boyfriend, let's call him Mike. A civil ceremony, judge's chambers, no family in attendance. You are dead to them, mirrors draped with black cloth. Your brown baby, a boy, my cousin, let's call him Jacob. He, like you, a whisper, a frown. Your brother and his wife, pregnant with me, move in with your parents. They are bereft. You are dead to them. You are not dead.
Woo. I feel like I just had family dinner somewhere. Anybody, any final questions or comments? Ellen or Connemara, Meredith, Jane, Nick, Olga? Vivian?
I've heard the poems. Some of them emerge and read them, and they said just still felt new to me. And it's a brave project both of you have been doing, however essential it may be for your soul and spirit and sanity, etc. Still, it's a brave endeavor, and I applaud you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ellen, go ahead.
Yes, yes. I'd like to say that I have Margot's book and I read them pretty regularly out loud to myself. I'm always astonished. Margo and I go back a ways, and Cynthia, I can't wait to get hold of yours. Both of your projects have that, they must be written. You just must write. And I'm sure everybody shares that who's on a poetry Zoom, it has to be written. And yet because we're all meeting now and because you're willing to talk about read and talk about your poems and even make them a dialogue, it reminds me how alive poetry is. It's still a matter of life and death when you put pen to paper. And I'm glad that you brought this to me today, particularly. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Ellen. It's great to see you.
Want to thank you both. I want to thank you, all of you, and most of all, two poets, two rivers of the words, of melodies that I enjoy most in poetry always. And when I enjoy the melody of the river of the poetry, I know that I love it. So thank you very much.
Right. No, not hearing anything else. So I want to thank you for everyone in the audience doesn't know that I kind of threw a curveball at Cynthia and Margo and said, hey, here's our format. They said, what? And they really adapted it. Thank you for, we'll call this the ping pong poetry session, back and forth. I like it. And I love I agree with, I think, Connemara's statement. The personal aspect of your poetry is, I feel like sometimes I was in the room or observing a room that you were in when you were experiencing it, very visual for me. And just your courage to write it all out, share it. Cynthia, even if your family won't read it, we love it.
Thanks.
So
They were all mostly dead, that's why. So I waited.
we'll make them. We'll get them in a room. We'll tie them to a chair. Make them listen.
Thank you, John.
Good. We're almost at the hour, so I'm gonna sign off. Margo and Cynthia, thank you again.
Thank you.
For your 100% participation. I want to thank your writing group for being here en masse. So now we have one more session next week, and that'll be it for season 2. And you can always go to stockbridgelibrary.org and you can access any of the sessions we had in the past. So that's it. And hopefully I'll see everyone next week.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no, it's
Thank
great.
you.
Great.
And thanks
Very good.
everybody for coming.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Take care, everyone.
You too, John.
Nick, that's.